Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life.
Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I am absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to interview author Marv Weidner, who has written an insightful, wise, and touching book titled When the Rocks Sing, about the loss of his wife to cancer, his grief journey, and finding the resilience to keep moving forward with life. When the Rocks Sing is much more than a story about grief and resilience. It is also a love story. Marv's love for his intelligent, loving, wise, and beautiful wife, Marty, can be felt as he recounts his story of losing his beloved wife of 19 years to cancer and the incredible life lessons he learned as he grieved, found resilience, and rebuilt his life. I especially appreciated how, throughout the book, Marv coupled his grief journey with the insightful perspective of Carol Goldstein Davis, his therapist and co-author, who walked the road of rebuilding and resiliency with him. Before Marv and Marty met, he had earned an undergraduate degree in political science and economics and a graduate degree in theology. He is the founder and CEO of Managing Results, a strategic planning company based in Gunnison, Colorado, and a volunteer with Living Journeys, a local not-for-profit organization that provides services and support to cancer patients and their families and caregivers. I'll be talking with Marty about the courage with which his wife Marty faced cancer and her own death, the value of staying present in the midst of trauma, the tremendous lesson Marv learned that being happy is a decision, the new sense of purpose Marv discovered after Marty transitioned, and more for what is sure to be an inspiring, touching, and wisdom-filled interview with a remarkable man. Hey, Marv, a heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you, Irene. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Totally a pleasure for both of us.
Indeed.
So let's have everyone get to know you a little bit. Could you tell us about your precious Marty, describe your relationship with her, and tell us about your shared Zen Buddhism?
Sure. Marty and I were together for 19 years, 19 beautiful years. We had what some might call a couple bubble. We had a world unto ourselves. We raised children together. We ran a business together. We built a home together. And we were very, very much in love, and of course still are. We really understood each other from the very beginning. In fact, we worked together before we were a couple. So we had a lot of shared experiences, and our shared values went very, very deep.
How did you originally meet her, Marv?
Well, I was doing my consulting, and she was working for my first large local government customer, the city of Austin. So we were charged to work together on a very large project, and we got to know each other professionally and then as friends. And much later, we started exploring, how we wanted to experience God in our lives. And we sort of leaned toward the Buddhist perspective about God being within us and all things being connected, and living a life of gratitude in that way. So we started studying at a Zen Buddhist temple in Hawaii because we happened to be working there at the time. And so we got to practice our meditation beginning in about 2000. And I continue to practice that today.
You could really see that as your story evolves, how that has provided you with so much comfort And we'll talk about that too, I'm sure. Tell us about Marty's remarkable response to the news that she had cancer from which there was no escape, how you responded to that news, and please tell us about your decision to face it together. I mean, your story is such a love story. It's amazing.
Well, to share a little bit about Marty, she was remarkably present. She didn't worry much about the past because she couldn't do anything about that. And she worried very little about the future as well. She was one of those precious souls that really lived in the present moment. And so the Buddhist practice around meditation, which is, the goal is to be as present as possible, right down to just simply focusing on your breathing. That's how she was. She was very present in the moment, in the day. And when we learned about the cancer, her initial response was, and this was on the way to the hospital from Gunnison to Colorado Springs, she felt all of the concerns about daily life to just leave her. And she did weep. She cried during that ambulance ride. But as she shared it with my son and me later, it was because she was so happy, because she was so happy with her life. She was actually crying out of a sense of joy rather than sadness or fear.
A remarkable person. Wow.
Yeah, remarkable person. So when we got the news, I think you'll probably maybe recall in the book, my stomach fell. It was the most terrible news that we could ever possibly imagine. And per the way, we tried to live, the future that we had imagined was gone and the past no longer mattered. So we kind of engaged all of the resources that we had built together over 19 years to do everything together, to face life straight on and honestly, and to not keep anything from each other. And that was a guiding star principle for us, to always share everything together, not hold anything back, to live with open hearts, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got the news, we named it for what it was. It was terminal cancer, and we faced it together.
That's amazing. That's so remarkable. And I would imagine the way you handled it, when she did pass, it gave you tremendous closure because you had not a single woulda, coulda, shoulda.
No, not a one.
And I was that way about my husband, Saul. Saul and I were very close. And the night before he died, he said to me, and he did not know he was on a conscious level, that he was going to die in the accident. And he said, I'm so grateful and look, I'm so lucky and thankful to have you in my life. And that was the thing he said to me the night before he died. And I have never, that comforted me so much because we had a similar relationship to you and Marty. We just were right out there with our feelings and with whatever was going on. So I want to ask you also about your therapist, Carol Goldfein Davis. How quickly after receiving Marty's diagnosis did you reach out to her? And please share some of the ways she helped you to survive, ultimately thrive, and fall back in love with life. And selfishly, I asked the question because I really believe in healing, and a therapist has helped me so much in my life. So let's talk about Carol a little bit and your relationship with her. And the fact that you were so brave that, like, you had no problem. Let me go find someone to help me.
Well, Irene, you and I share that same perspective about getting help. None of us need to go through this alone. We need community, and we need someone who we can really go deep with. And what Carol did was to create a safe space for me, and a very wise and understanding listener who could empathize and understand what I was experiencing and give me a place where I could explore my deepest sadness, my greatest memories, and also my fears. And creating that safe space for me literally saved my emotional life. And certainly, and I've told her this many times, I wouldn't be here. Not only would I not be here where I am, as a person, I wouldn't be here without her. And a little bit of an insight from when she came into our lives. This was toward the end of the 9 months that Marty and I had together after her diagnosis. And it was probably a couple of months before she passed that we started asking for help, realizing how great our losses were becoming. And what I would encourage is to not wait. I would encourage everyone, as you perhaps encounter, a terminal diagnosis or some very fearful news about a medical condition, or in your case, Irene, someone who experienced a sudden and profound loss, to reach out to find someone who is, deeply wise, deeply skilled, and who can really provide that safe space. And one of the things that Carol taught me is how to be with someone who is experiencing grief, and that is to just listen, right? Just be quiet with them and listen to them at the deepest level possible.
It's like about when the rocks sing, it's like when the heart cries or when the heart sings, just to witness.
Yes, indeed.
To that person's experience. And for some people, seeking a counselor, Marv, is very difficult and very alien to them. How did you find Carol? Did you go to the Yellow Pages, or did someone recommend her, or what was that process about?
Well, we were in hospice at that point. So Marty's condition, which we had known for quite some time, was well past really healing. It was about helping her stay comfortable and ease her days. And we asked the hospice nurses for help, and they referred us to Carol. Carol had previously been a social worker for the local hospice organization associated with our hospital. So they knew her well and thought it would be a good match, and it was an extraordinary match.
I've been very blessed with counselors and therapists who have come into my life also, and it makes all the difference in the world when you have that loving, understanding perspective to bounce off. Could you talk to us about the emotional and physical intimacy you and Marty experienced during her cancer illness? Because you say it was deeper and more spiritual than anything you'd ever experienced before, and you two were really close. So how did it become even more intense as each precious moment ticked by?
It's a really deep part of our story. When we learned about the diagnosis, and then through the progressive treatments of chemotherapy and whole brain radiation and several operations and all the rest, understanding that Marty was a very independent woman and very much her own person. She had a great voice. She was extremely articulate. And over the months, she lost her ability to walk. I would lift her out of bed into the wheelchair, take her to the restroom, take her out to the windows where we were living on a mountain and serve her breakfast. And she would see the birds and the deer running through the yard and, all the rest. And so she became physically very dependent on me. And that kind of physical and emotional intimacy became very spiritual for us. And over time, because of the whole brain radiation, Irene, she lost her ability to finish a sentence and then ultimately to speak. So it became an intuitive process where she would start something and I would do my best to finish her thought for her. And she could acknowledge that I had it right or I had it wrong by her facial expression. So we really began to talk for each other.
In a way, like telepathy.
Very much so. Very much so. And it was because of our heart level connection, we were able to do that. But just another comment about Carol being a helper. One of the things that happened at the toward the last several weeks of Marty's life was she very much wanted to see her relatives who live in Arizona, and they couldn't all come. And it was impossible for her to really express the degree of importance of doing that, because in truth, she might not have actually physically survived that trip. She might have passed away on that trip. And it was Carol who helped her express those emotions without verbalizing them, so that we could have very clear confirmation that she knew the risks and she wanted to make the trip anyway.
Wow. And she made the trip.
She made the trip. And we came back, and she had a few more weeks of life after that.
Wow. Wow. She really had closure also.
She did.
She had, what a beautiful thing in a way. When the rocks sing, no rock unturned, no stone unturned.
None. She was not afraid of death. What she was afraid of is that it would surprise her. So through those last months and weeks, what we tried to do, the hospice nurses and I would tell her, where her illness was and how it was progressing.
So she knew exactly what was going on. What was the inspiration for the title of your book, When the Rocks Sing?
Well, one of the things that I realized coming from the depths of sadness that I experienced, and it was the kind of trauma that you and I and so many have experienced in losing a spouse or a family member, is that I realized that my life was shrinking. And in order to, in a way, overcome that or recover from that, I decided that I really needed to get out in the world and travel. And so I wanted to go to places that I'd never been before and didn't know anyone, and would force myself to come out again and be out in the world. And I chose to go to Australia and New Zealand. In New Zealand, on the South Island, there's a place called Greymouth. And I was there for 3 days. I walked that beach for 3 days. And it was somewhere mid-afternoon on the second day that I realized that there was a sound that I couldn't quite make out. And as I stood there very quietly, and it took several times for me to figure out what was going on. But as the large waves would come in and then they would go out over the rocks that were on that beach, they're kind of beaten into disc shapes, they would chatter against each other. And what I realized was that at that point, my mind was calm enough and my heart was still enough so that I could hear those beautiful, subtle sounds of nature. And I was still in love with life. At that point, I realized that I was still in love with life. And the title of the book references that experience because I hope for everyone who's lost a loved one that they too will come to a point when their mind is calm enough and their heart is still enough to hear those subtle, beautiful sounds of life.
Absolutely. That's why I always ask people in my interviews about joy, because you hope that you will get through that so that you can have a joy again, because the grief feels so devastating. And speaking of that, in your book, you talk about grief. Would you like to tell us what you've learned about grief? Marv, is the process the same for everyone to you? What have you got to tell us about what you've learned about grief?
Thank you. That's a very important question. What I have observed and what I've learned is that the grief process is not structured. It's organic. And it's a process of very intense emotions. I describe them as a successive line of waves coming over me. And sometimes over time, they'll become less frequent and less intense. But it's very individualized. My own grief was solely about sadness. Others experience a whole variety of emotions. And those previous philosophers whose shoulders we stand on, who gave it structure, were trying to give something structure that it doesn't need and doesn't exist. It's an organic process. It's highly individualized. There's no time frame. There's no right time frame. There's no time frame by which you should be over it or through it. A loss like the one you've experienced, Irene, and me, and many of your listeners, we never actually get over that. We learn to live with it and becomes part of us. The love that we feel for our loved one continues, and so does the grief in whatever form it takes in our lives.
And as the years go by, you still miss that person, you still think about that person, but it takes a different, for me at least, it takes a little, it's not as intense. And it informs your life in a lot of ways. I think it opens your heart to give you more compassion.
I agree.
Something like that. And another theme running through your book, which is so important, is resiliency. Who taught you your first lesson about resiliency? How does resiliency help to let loss transform a person into something new, which is so important, because we're talking about that when you have a loss, it's not about snapping back to life as it was.
Yeah, it will never be the same.
No.
Right. So resiliency is not about, being strong like an oak tree. It's about being a willow. We bend and we bend in the wind, but we don't break. And resiliency is very much about recovery. It's like communities who experience a flood or a natural disaster. How is it that they're able to get back to, to business, to kids going to school, be able to get back into their homes? And resiliency is something that I think we're all born with. If you think about premature babies, they fight for life. And I think we all fight for life. We all want to continue our life and to find, love and inspiration and wonder in the world. And I experienced resiliency as a kid growing up in farm country in the middle of Iowa. I would watch the cycle of the crops. I would watch the animals, that would, be raised and then, become food. And the cycle of life was very much all around me. So the impermanence of life, I guess, is what really embeds in me in our ability and our resources to be resilient, because there is no permanence. This is all a life in cycle, and knowing that and accepting that and embracing the impermanence of life really then tells us we can continue. We can come back, as you say, from a hand grenade being thrown in the middle of our life, Irene, and we can continue and we can recover. We will be changed, perhaps more compassionate, perhaps more grateful. But we do have the ability, with help from counselors, with help from our community and our families, to begin to rebuild life, in our own time frame. And I have lots of stories about resilience, from refugees from Southeast Asia to watching my son, climb mountains that he didn't know he could climb. But we all have it within us. And I think knowing that gives us a lot of hope and strength as we try to recover from these great losses.
Yeah, I don't know if you would agree with me with this, but to me, resiliency also has a lot to do with the story that you build for yourself around your loss and what you're going through. I mean, a lot of it has to do with your history, perhaps, and the way people handled things when you were growing up and what you learned. But also, you can change that story. You can decide that I will somehow get through this, and you can employ people like your therapist to help you on that journey, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and those narratives that we build in our minds, what we bring into the experience and then what we take out of it. One of the things that I talk about somewhat in the book, somewhat briefly, is the one thing to avoid is to see yourself as a victim. It really incapacitates your ability to keep your heart open, to believe that life is going to continue to bring you wonder and love.
Right. And therefore, you keep yourself from all the good stuff that could be out there for you.
All the good stuff coming your way.
Hanging
That's
in
right.
That old story, right?
Right.
Well, the other thing I want to ask you is, how do you continue to connect with Marty now that she's on the other side? I know that you do that. This is something that many of the people in our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience have experienced, keeping that connection going. So how do you two do that?
Well, we do that in a couple of ways. And, everybody does this their own way.
But we're giving people some ideas. So
our shared griefs, our shared gravesite is here just on the edge of the small town where I live in Western Colorado. And I'll go out and have a chat with Marty and tell her, what's happening with our children. Sometimes I pose a question and I hear an answer in my.
It comes into your head
very quickly, almost instantaneously. I tell her, that's one of the places I go to tell her how much I still love her and am grateful for everything that she brought into our world, all the love and all the wisdom that she continues to share with me and our children and the people who knew her. So it's very much an internal process for me, and it's a very beautiful process that we have.
Sure, it's so comforting to you to do that. I still talk to Saul too, and I mean, it really. And I know he's here. I know he's listening. What is this new sense of purpose you've discovered after Marty transitioned? You want to tell us about that? Because that's what this is all about. You harnessed your resilience. You went to therapy. So now, what's the evolved Marv about?
Well, the before and after is, while Marty was still alive, my main purpose in life was to be the best husband to her I could possibly be. That was the organizing principle for my life and for hers as well. And when she passed, that purpose literally evaporated. To continue to love her, of course, was there, but that part of the way I was living my life was really gone. And a few months after, I really realized how lost I was without that purpose, without a sense of purpose. So I spent a lot of time during those intense months after she passed, walking and meditating, and of course, talking to my kids, my friends, my community, and Carol. And it was really on a long trip that I took, similar to the one in New Zealand, that I realized that my purpose was to continue to live with an open heart. And that's how Marty and I framed our love, our relationship, was to live with an open heart with each other. So, here I am, vulnerable and living with an open heart to what life and the people in it might bring to me.
And what a great gift you give everyone in your life now. And you've shown them that you can go on and you can keep that great love with you. So, but there is a greatest gift you and Marty ever gave each other that transcends death. You want to tell us about that?
One of the great gifts was that we had a conversation a couple of years before she passed. And that was what I call the conversation, right? We talked about, and Marty initiated this conversation, what do we want for each other should one of us pass first?
And this was before her diagnosis.
Oh, long before her diagnosis, a year and a half before the diagnosis. She started the conversation and I followed the conversation. And that is that we wanted each other to be happy, and to be happy in all things, including love, including family, and to continue to live life fully after one of us passed. And we had this moment where I was helping her from the bed one day, and she started laughing. This was a long way into the 9 months. She started laughing. She was really just having a belly roller of a laugh. And when she caught her breath, I said, "Tell me, love, what's funny?" She said, I thought you were going to go first to me."
Surprise.
Surprise. So that gift that she gave me, she wants me to be happy. She wants me to continue to live my life out as fully as possible, is the greatest gift she could have possibly given me.
That is a wonderful gift. That's beautiful. So what is Marv's message about the importance of healing, hope, and resilience to those who may be about to experience a loss or actively grieving a loss? And there's something about the concept of integration that you talk about that has to do with all of this.
Right. So one of the things that I learned through the grief process was to allow the feelings that come up to be expressed when they come up, to not defer them or to push them away or to suppress them in any way. And for me, that was sadness, right? Is exclusively
so
about
no matter
sadness.
Where you were, if the sadness came up, you're in a business meeting or whatever.
I excused myself. I told folks ahead of time that I may need to excuse myself. And when those feelings came up, I walked out of the room. I told them I'd be back in 20, 30 minutes. And I went to be alone or outside and allow those feelings to be expressed. And what that does is it's a way of loving yourself, and it's a way of embracing the love for your lost loved one that's there inside you. It's a vital part of the healing process to allow those feelings to be expressed as they want to be expressed, right? So that's an essential part of, I think, the healing process. The second thing I would suggest is, as you have, Irene, and that is get help. You don't have to do this alone. Stay close to your community and your family, but get in touch with, be with someone who really understands the grief process and can be there for you. Carol and I worked together intensively for 2 years afterwards, after Marty passed. And it was probably the most important thing that I could have possibly done for the healing process.
It really helped you she really gave you a bridge onto the rest of your life. It was wonderful.
She was the bridge. And the third thing I just mentioned, and I'll be quick about this, is that for me, I was a bit of a writer to begin with, but I found that journaling, about telling, in writing, keeping a private journal of all the things I was experiencing, all the questions I had, all the thoughts that I had, was really important to me. And it actually led then to writing When the Rocks Sing.
That's beautiful. And this integration, is that about accepting all of the experiences and integrating everything into your package now?
Yes, everything in my package. Exactly. everything in my life. Yes. And it's a bit of accepting that the greater the love, the greater the loss, and that loss is an integral part of life. That the better we are, the more willing we are to accept loss as a part of life. It makes it less fearsome and less scary when it does happen. And I think it positions us to find that resiliency within ourselves, to find hope within ourselves, and to find the ways that each of us need to be able to move forward compassionately and with gratitude that we're still here, that we still have a life to live. So it's very much integrating all of that and accepting basically both the impermanence and the wonder of life.
Yeah, you're, in a way, the bottom line is your book is very uplifting because of what happened to you and how you came through it. And from this great love that you had and how you did integrate it and move on with your life. So I want to ask you, because I'm encouraging everyone to get your book. Do you have a special offer for our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience today?
I certainly do. If you go to Ballast, Ballast books, that's the publisher. If you go to their website and click on bookstore and type in the name of the book or my name, there'll be a special code in honor of your work and your podcast. If you enter, and I haven't set this up, it'll probably be tomorrow or so. If you enter at the point you're purchasing the word Rebirth, it will give you a 20% discount, Irene.
That's wonderful. That's great. Thank you for that. And what is the Marv important tip for finding joy in life?
Keep an open heart. Keep an open mind to the wonder and the love that can come your way or will come your way.
Right. Stay open. Well, Marv, I want to tell you that I so deeply resonate with this very wise quote from When the Rocks Sing that is proven true in my own life. And it is: grief resulting from the loss of a loved one can overwhelm us for a time. It will become part of us always, but it does not determine our future. We can choose to be happy, choose our purpose, and how we live each day. I want to thank you from my heart, Marv, for this inspiring, touching, and wisdom-filled interview. And here's a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts. As I like to say, to be continued, many blessings. Thank you again, Marv, and bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.